This, bless you, this had so much potential. Bless you. And I'm looking at the list. It is such a weird, what did I do this month? Hi everyone. Welcome to another monthly wrap-up. I already filmed this whole thing and I realized my mic wasn't on, and that was just my test run, just my dress rehearsal. I'm fully in pajamas. I'm sorry. It's just one of those days. The air quality here in Seoul is really bad. We're staying inside, and I figured it can be like a little pajama party for us. How about that? Before we dive into the strange books, it was a weird reading month. Strange books that I read in April. Want to give a shout out to Book of the Month, who sponsored this video. As usual, thank you so much. Book of the Month, if you don't know, is a service that has a team of people comb through new releases, pick their favorites from all different genres, and then you are able to choose one or two or three or more for a low controlled price. They're all going to be hardcovers, like I said, new releases. So you can use my code CARI to get your first book for $9.99. I'm going to tell you quickly what the books for May are. I'm really excited to talk about the last one, so I'm just keeping this one for last. First up, Breathless. We're talking about a thriller. We have a journalist who decided to, for a story, climb a very treacherous mountain with a crew. And on the way up, a climber dies. And they think it's a freak accident, but it's not. So, spooky, adrenaline, thriller. We love it. Next up, we have a cute little rom-com. This is called Part of Your World, and it is about a city girl meets a country boy. I think he's a carpenter or like a wood worker. Yeah, he's a ridiculously hot carpenter. And so I think it's just about, you know, how far will you go for love? Darling Girl. This book is actually, I'm really interested in it. It follows the female descendants of Wendy, as in Wendy Darling, as in Peter Pan. And it seems like Peter just kind of keeps coming back for the Darling Girls. You know, whatever. He's annoying, but that's fine. Until the youngest, the great-granddaughter of Wendy, goes missing. Which is, you know, maybe she ran away. I don't know. She's been in a coma for 10 years. I don't think she ran away. So they are trying to find her. I don't know. I'm intrigued. Next up is a contemporary drama romance, maybe. It takes place in LA. This is Yerba Buena. And it follows two women who have, through their kind of complicated pasts, found their way to LA, found each other, and they are basically two people who feel lost, and they are just trying to feel found, whether it's a place or a person. So, Yerba Buena. Take My Hand takes place in Alabama in the 1970s, and it follows a nurse who is specifically working in like family planning, so whether that is giving people birth control, abortions, helping people with their complicated pregnancies, whatever that may be, and she gets kind of wrapped up with this one particular family, and the story goes on from there. It is a recently desegregated Alabama, and yeah, it is by the same author of Wench. So when I read the inside of this, let me tell you, I was sold. This is the Hacienda. Let me just Mexican Gothic meets Rebecca. Sold. In this debut supernatural suspense novel set in the aftermath of the Mexican War of Independence, about a remote house, a sinister haunting, and the woman pulled into their clutches. Yes, those 6 are the books of the month, but Book of the Month also has add-ons, and so let me tell you about what they added on this month, and that you can add on too. Book of Night by Holly Black. I can't tell you how stoked I am to have received this. I have had my ups and downs with The Cruel Prince, but I do love Holly Black, and honestly, like, low-key, The Cruel Prince has become one of my favorite series, and I have reread it, and Cardin and I have a enemies to lovers thing going on. It's okay. I love Holly Black. She writes fantasy so beautifully. I have no idea what this book is about, and I don't want to, but it is going to be fantastic because I love Holly Black. So, book of the night. Anyway, once again, my code is CARI. You can use it to get your first book for $9.99. Thank you so much to Book of the Month, as always. I'm so excited about these. That is that. Enjoy. We're going to dive into what I read in April. And I'm looking at the list. It is such a weird, what did I do this month? First up, I ended my March reading wrap up by telling you that I had started Pure Color. And I have the physical version of this book. Oh, there it is. I knew I put it somewhere nearby. Oh, that is dust. Did you see that? I hope not. So I did not finish this. I got to about halfway through. Ooh, I'm so frustrated by this book. This is Pure Color, and I read, it's broken up into 3 parts, I believe, possibly 4. I underlined so much of the beginning of this book. It was so interesting. And then I got to the second part and it got so weird that I didn't even want to continue. And my mom apparently trudged through it. And she said, like, don't bother. What is this even about? The first part seems like it's going to be kind of this love story, but it's really like you get a tiny bit of plot and then the narrator just goes off on this tangent. And I thought that the tangents were beautiful, so I really didn't mind. And they were talking about like the idea of God created everything, but maybe this is just his first draft, and and so I thought that those ideas were really interesting. But then her father dies, and it goes into this whole other thing about her father, and like they become a tree. I don't know. It became really too weird for me. I read a little bit to part 3, and then I stopped right after that. So yeah, this is such a bummer because it had such a promising start, and yeah, I couldn't finish this. So started April strong with a DNF. Then I finally listened to you guys and I read Bear the Bear and the Nightingale. This is a fantasy inspired by kind of Russian fairy tales. I enjoyed this book, but it was a little bit harder for me to get into than your average fantasy, I would say. I think it's because this one really felt like a fairy tale, to the point where a lot of the characters were sort of, is it one-dimensional? Where they were clearly just kind of these fairy tale characters. So we had like an evil stepmother who, when she's introduced, I thought that she was going to be a sympathetic character. I thought that she was going to have a lot of different sides to her, because we really meet her when she's not the stepmother, and then she becomes the stepmother and she's just immediately the evil, crazy stepmom. I don't know. And even like the dad and like all of these people were just very clearly the fairy tale characters, and so I didn't super like that. I was also quite confused because all of the characters, she has like a ton of brothers. I don't actually know how many siblings she has because they all had nicknames, and then their nicknames had nicknames, and then their nicknames had nicknames. Everybody had like 5 names, and so it was quite confusing for me to be like, wait, who actually is this character? So it was just very bumpy to get into. I was also sold on this because I was told it was a slow burn romance, and that just had me, every time a new character was introduced, I was like, oh, is this gonna be the romantic character? Oh, is this gonna be the... Let me tell you, when there is like no romance in this book, when they say slow burn, I'm assuming it means that it's gonna start in book 2 or 3, because there was I think for me it was quite long and just a little slower paced than I'm used to, because it had that kind of like fairy tale way about it. So I did enjoy it, but if you have been reading like fast-paced adventure fantasy and then you go read this, it might be quite difficult for you. So if you like a slower paced, really just kind of beautiful, very fairy tale-esque story, I do recommend it. I am excited to continue it. I actually just got, I think it's the second one in from the library today, so I will probably be reading those on the airplane. And that is The Bear and the Nightingale. Also really love the idea of like the spirits or the gods or whatever. Very much enjoyed. So next up is Shoko's Smile, which I also read about 75% of. I didn't read every single story. Shoko's Smile is a collection of short stories. I had seen people raving about it, and no one told me how depressing these stories were. I didn't have any expectations, but I didn't expect just like extremely depressing content. I read the first book. If you guys watch my main channel, I was vlogging. I was going to go see the cherry blossoms. It was like this nice, wonderful day. I was eating this wonderful granola bowl. I read the first story and I was so depressed. It is so dark. So they are just these kind of contemporary stories. And I thought that the writing was really engaging. Like, it was very easy to read, but very dark content. So it was like I couldn't read it all in one sitting kind of thing. I mean, not to judge a book by its cover and title, but it's like Shoko's Smile and the cover is like yellow. But definitely check it out if you are looking for a short story collection. Just be ready for it. Shoko's Smile. Okay, here's a book that I already kind of talked about in my previous video about series that are being continued in 2022. That is Defy the Night. Speaking of covers, I don't know, looking at it now, I don't know how I did this, but for some reason I saw Defy the Night and I thought it was going to be some kind of like Ready Player One kind of thing. I don't know. The purple and like I don't know, it threw me off. I thought it was going to be video game related or something weird. Wrong. So wrong. Defy the Night is about a girl who is working with her partner to steal medicine and distribute it to kind of the poor village people who are not able to get it. What is this medicine? It's not a vaccine, but this medicine allegedly kind of helps with this plague fever thing, pandemic, that is taking over the whole kingdom. And of course she gets caught and the story goes on from there. For those who didn't watch the previous video, I talked about how I felt kind of bad for Bridget because she wrote this prior to COVID. And I think if I had read this without having lived through a pandemic and seen vaccine distributions and how different governments handled this, this whole thing, I feel like I would have had an easier time reading this book. But what this book essentially is two 20-year-old boys who are suddenly in charge because their parents were assassinated, who have to deal with not having a cure for this, having a couple small places, aka companies, who are in charge of making and distributing the medicine, so not everyone has access to it. The rich are obviously getting taken care of a lot more than the poor. Yeah, I felt bad because had I read this in 2019, I would have felt differently. I thought that it was fine though, as long as I didn't, like, if you kind of silence that voice in the back of your head of like, you're not really handling this responsibly or whatever, There are twists that I saw coming, but I didn't see them coming the way that they came. Does that make sense? So I don't know. She kept me on my toes. I could very clearly see the world. Like, it was a very visual book for me. I absolutely felt like I was watching a movie sometimes when I was reading it. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't anything groundbreaking. And I enjoyed it. So I am very excited. I think it's a duology. I am excited for the second one coming out this year. Next up is The Inheritance of Orchidea Divina. Orchidea Divina? This was recommended to me by a friend. It is a magical realism. I went into it without knowing anything. I just enjoyed the cover. And this is by the same author of, the Brujas, the Labyrinth Lost, which I also enjoyed, but I didn't finish the series yet. This is about a matriarch, the grandma, Orchidea Divina. She comes to this tiny town in Texas and she just raises a family, and it's a very complicated but tight-knit family. Everybody kind of has not magic, but like a skill, like they've got kind of something. They've got some kind of energy within them. And she sends out a letter to all of her relatives being like, hey, I'm dying. Come collect your inheritance before I go. So we have different timelines of present day where we follow mainly one or two of the grandchildren, because everybody comes back to the house. But we also are having all of these flashbacks to Orchidea's life, and she has never really told people about her past. She's had like she's had like 4 husbands, but maybe she's had 5. She always talks about how she like made some kind of deal with the devil potentially. So nobody really knows what is a lie, what is just a story. And so I did really enjoy it. It is magical realism, so there are these kind of strange things that happen, like everybody has a flower that blossoms from their body in the family. There's a rooster that never dies. Yeah, I just thought it was really beautiful. There's bits of it where she joins a traveling carnival. There's so many different stories and things that are happening. Yeah, I do highly recommend it, but it's not just like a clean-cut fantasy. It's definitely magical realism. The Inheritance of Orchidea Divina. Next up is a book that I loved and I also talked about in that video of series that are continuing in 2022. This was A Magic Steeped in Poison. It is based off of Chinese mythology. It is a fantasy. Did I think the plot was super strong? No. But it is completely made up for with the magic system and just the descriptive language within this book. So the magic system is actually based around tea and brewing different kinds of tea, not only using it somewhat as a potion in a way of like, oh, I'll make you a cup of tea that makes you go to sleep, or I'll make you a cup of tea that makes you brave. But there's this whole other level to it where it actually like creates this connection between the brewer and the drinker. For example, there's like a scene, this isn't a spoiler, but there's a scene where someone needs to do kind of surgery, and instead of using anesthesia, she like brings them into this weird tea realm and like distracts them so that in the real world they don't feel the pain, you know? Really interesting, really cool. The descriptions of each kind of tea, the descriptions of each kind of food. I mean, it is a mouth-watering book. What it is about, though, is a girl who has lost her mother to a poison, and her sister is also dying of the poison. Her mother was a tea master, and her sister was the apprentice, but our main girl has kind of obviously learned everything. She has this kind of innate power for it. And so when her sister gets a letter to come to this tea master competition at the royal palace, our main girl takes that letter and goes in her stead and competes. And the reason the main girl even goes is because she thinks that if she wins the competition, she can then ask the emperor for a favor, which would be, hey, can you send all of your super doctors to save my sister, right? But there are also like assassination attempts happening against the princess, and like there's just a lot going on. The plot wasn't incredible. I didn't think that the characters were super strong, but the way that the world was laid out, the way that it was described, it was a joy to read. It was just like a very, I tasted it, I smelled it, I saw it kind of book. So A Magic Steeped in Poison. Next up, I read The Renegades, continuing my strange relationship with Marissa Meyer. Marissa Meyer has written the Lunar Chronicles, which I loved, Heartless, which ripped my heart out, and I am scarred by it, Gilded, which I read last month and talked about. She does a lot of fairy tale retellings. So when I picked up The Renegades, I had no idea what this was going to be about. I thought maybe it was like a Hunger Games fantasy kind of thing. No, it's superheroes. It was a little hard to get into simply because it wasn't really my style. But once I got into it, it was an interesting story. It follows a girl named Nova who was kind of raised by the villain. So there was society as we know it now, before they even called them superheroes, they were just people with powers, right? And so they were, you know, pushed away, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Her uncle rose up, overthrew the government. He was like an anarchist, so he just tried to get rid of everything. And then the superheroes came and overthrew him. And now we have like kind of the same society, except superheroes are like in charge of everything, which is like not perfect as well. Like none of these things were perfect, right? So anyway, she was raised by the anarchist villain, and she is tasked with joining the superheroes, aka the renegades, and kind of like infiltrating their system and like learning how to take them down from the inside, right? Because she has her like villain crew. Of course there is romance. This is young adult, and I really felt like this romance was super young adult because my god, it was so cringe. It was just like, you know, young teenagers being cringy. Yeah, I did like it. I will continue it. I actually got the second one from the library and I just didn't have time. I thought that all of the superpowers were quite funny and quite interesting. And it did, when I closed my eyes, it really did feel like a comic. So yeah, I would say it wasn't a bad book. It just wasn't my taste. So if you're interested in superheroes, a little bit of cringe but sweet romance, and then this, I guess, kind of political intrigue, it had it all. So yeah, that is Renegades, and then it's Arch Enemies, and then Supernova. So it's a trilogy. So yeah, the Renegades. Next up, I read 4 books. I read Stalking Jack the Ripper, Hunting Prince Dracula, Escaping from Harry Houdini, and Capturing the Devil. I made an entire reading vlog about reading Stalking Jack the Ripper because so many people have recommended it to me since the beginning of time, I think. And I liked Stalking Jack the Ripper. So let me set the scene for you a little bit. This series is about one girl whose name is Audrey Rose. I'm just going to call her Audrey. We have Audrey, who is somewhat well-to-do, kind of a lady in England, but she wants to be, I don't even know if she knows what she wants to be, but she loves working on dead bodies. She loves doing autopsies, right? So maybe she wants to be a coroner, I don't know. But lucky for her, her uncle is a coroner, and so he lets her, you know, cut up dead bodies and stuff like that. And then she ends up meeting his apprentice, Thomas, and the 3 of them, Uncle Audrey Thomas, go on to solve crimes together throughout the whole series. I enjoyed Stalking Jack the Ripper, and I wish that it was a standalone because if I think about it critically, I hated everything about the book, piece by piece. I didn't like the characters. I thought that they were very one-dimensional. Like, they each had their like thesis statement and stuck to it. Audrey is very independent, scared of being caged in and bossed around and treated like, you know, a lady kind of thing, right? So she's very scared of commitment, blah, 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 blah. Thomas, what's his thing? He just likes to make innuendos, and he's very charming. And he also looks at things like equations. Oh my god. Whenever he sees like a scary murder or something, he's like no emotion. He can just look at it like an equation. And then the uncle, I don't even know what his deal is. He just kind of floats around. I don't want to get into every character, but like every character has their thing until suddenly they don't have their thing because it doesn't work for the plot. So I didn't like that. I didn't mind in the first one. I didn't really mind the changes, the historical inaccuracies. But they really bothered me further in the series, especially the second one, where, she just like got this so wrong. It couldn't decide, once you get further into the series, it couldn't decide if it was a romance or a murder mystery. These kids are like 16 and 18, and they are literally dealing with some of the most horrific murders in history, and they're just like, burp. It was so unrealistic. And so for the first one, I was totally fine with that because, you know, it's what I signed up for, right? Teenagers trying to figure out who Jack the Ripper is. Okay, that's going to be unrealistic. But as it continued, the unrealistic ness of these books just got old. So I totally agree when people were saying that the series is only good for like the first 2 books. I would argue the series is only good for the first book and then like the first 25% of the second book, which is a bummer. But so why did I finish it? I just wanted to know how it ended. Yeah, I felt kind of spoiled by this series because I had heard a detail about this that made me think that all of these characters were much older than they were. I feel like it would have been a lot better if they had aged up, like a little bit more realistic. If they had aged up the characters a little bit, like these characters are 16 and 18. 16 and 17 the whole time, really. It was a series that I really wanted to like, and I did like the first one, but unrealistic to a ridiculous level. And yeah, I was very mad at the ending of the second book. So let me know your thoughts about the series, because I know a lot of you guys read it. Let me know. Just let me know. I feel like if I had read them when I was very young and I didn't know the history behind some of these things, I would have enjoyed it. But me being who I am now, 'twas a miss. They were strangely comforting and I read them all. So here I am. And last but not least, I finally read Dance of Thieves, which is another book you guys have been coming at me for to read. It is actually on Kindle Unlimited, so I got it there. What is this book about? I literally just read it last night. I read it in one day. It is about what is her name? God, I read this yesterday and I read a little bit of the second book this morning. What is her name? We have Jace Kazi. There we go. Okay. So we have Kazi, who is a notorious thief, incredible pickpocket, sleight of hand, fading into the shadows. She's amazing. And she ends up getting recruited by her queen to be a part of this kind of high level of her guard or warrior or whatever. She and 2 of her friends are sent on a mission to find this fugitive who was like a very horrible person in the past war, and they think that he's hiding in this one city, and so they go there and try to find him. And in order to find him, they're probably gonna have to become friends with like the ruling family and infiltrate and like, you know, all the usual. Things immediately do not go as planned. Haywire. That's pretty much all that I can tell you. The thing that I want to warn people about, because did I enjoy this book? Yes, absolutely. I read it in one sitting. Well, I read it in one day, and I am currently starting Vow of Thieves, the second book. The thing that I need people to know is that the beginning is so clunky. I remember looking down because I read on my Kindle, and it told me like I was at 31% of the book when I realized like this is where the story makes sense. So you do have to read about a third of the book to kind of get into it, I felt, because this all takes place right after this big war happened. And so we don't get all of the info about the war. We're just kind of supposed to know that like, oh, there was this really bad war. And then we're also supposed to know, I don't know, kind of like the layouts of the kingdom and like who's on whose side, who are allies, who are these. There's like a ruling family that isn't technically in charge of any kingdom. They just like claim that they have some kind of ruling. I don't know. So there was just a lot of kind of world building clunkiness to it that I didn't understand, and it wasn't until about a third of the way in that I felt like the story hit a rhythm that I was comfortable in. I thought that the beginning was kind of weird. The meeting of these people, there's like a little bit of romance that I thought was kind of strange. Overall, basically, first third of the book took some getting into, and then I thought that it really picked up the pace. I enjoyed the introduction of the characters. I felt like the actual plot, like the whole mission that they were on, I completely forgot about it, to be honest, until it came into play later, like kind of at the end of the book. So yeah, I think that like just the world building and like the actual motivations were a little confusing to me, but give it time. And I did enjoy the last 2/3 of the book, and I'm ready to read the next one because cliffhanger, this, bless you, this had so much potential, bless you, to be a standalone and then it just decided not to be with one sentence. So yeah, just a warning. Maybe don't read the last page if you want it to be a standalone. But yeah, I pretty much had to immediately download the next book. So fair warning for that one. It's a duology. It's finished. It better be. I'm going to Google this after. But yeah, that's what I'm currently reading now. And then next up is absolutely going to be Book of Night. So excited. Going to finish this right before my trip. So yeah. Sorry that I've been reading kind of like mostly miss books. I feel like I haven't read a book that has been like amazing, like flawless in a while. So I would say if you're gonna pick up anything, Defy the Night was just like a fine time. A Magic Steeped in Poison was a beautiful experience. And then Dance of Thieves had a rocky beginning, but a fun, exciting end, right? I would say those are my favorite. And then Inheritance of Orchidea Divina is if you're okay with magical realism and it being a little like confusing. Really good. So those are my top ones. Yeah, I'm so excited. May is going to be interesting because I don't know what I'm going to load onto my Kindle for my trip because we're going to be on trains and planes and I'm going to have a lot of downtime to read, but maybe I'll just want to stare out the window. I don't know. So stay tuned for my May reads. I'm very interested, and I will see you guys next time. I don't know if you can hear my stomach growling, but I absolutely have to go get lunch. So once again, thank you to Book of the Month for sponsoring this. You can use my code CARI to get your first book for $9.99. I'm so excited about The Hacienda. I'm absolutely going to read that after Book of the Night. So anyway, I will see you guys then. Love you always. Let me know what you're reading. And let me know your thoughts on the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, because... okay, bye!